Shalom, shalom, mishpaka, mashpaka. Shalom, shalom to the whole house of Yasha'al, to all 12 tribes, to the elder Ak, Yehuda, to the younger Ak, Ephraim, to the stranger, the former Ger, the former Goyim or nation, the former Gentile, the former swine or pig, who was formerly considered a swine or a pig, an unclean thing because you did not make a distinction between the clean and the unclean. But now having been taught to make a distinction between the clean and the unclean, and having been engrafted into the Bayif, the house of Yasha'al, through Hanatsah, through the branch, Yahusha, HaMashiach, whereby becoming branches, whereby becoming Nazarim. You're no longer a Gentile, no longer a Goy, no longer a stranger to the covenants. You're no longer considered something unclean, no longer considered a swine or a dog. But now, indeed, you are considered a fellow Yasharite, an adopted son, and whereby privy to the same covenants, the same promise, and the same inheritance that was given to Yasha'al and to Yasha'al alone. Shalom, shalom to the whole Bayif of Yasha'al, all my mashpaka, worldwide, wherever your feet touch the soil, on this preparation Yom. On this preparation Yom. Shalom, mashpaka. Shalom. Mashpaka, on this preparation Yom, excuse me, I thought that it was appropriate on this day. Yahuwah has been somewhat prodding me to speak on this subject, and I think that today is an appropriate time, the day of preparation, to speak on the importance of the Shabbat Yom, to speak on the importance of guarding the Shabbat Yom. Many see it, Zion Mishpaka, as just a commandment. You know, they obey it because this is what the letter says to do. Indeed, it's important that we obey it, but it's also important that we understand why we're obeying it. It's important that we understand why it is so important, and it's important that we understand what it's pointing towards, and it's important that we understand why it is so special to Yahuwah, our Father. Again, some keep it from the letter, and that's, you know, it's okay. You're being obedient. But Yahuwah wants us to go beyond the letter and to understand the spirit. He wants us to understand the spirit and to make a distinction between the letter and the spirit. He wants us to understand, in other words, the intent behind the instruction. The intent behind the instruction. So I don't want to delay this because I don't want to make this video too long. But Yahuwah wants us to understand something. He wants us to understand the importance of the Shabbat Yom and why it is so special to him, and understanding why it is so special to him when we guard it. This should give us a different mindset. This should give us a different mindset in how we approach the Shabbat and how we keep it, and how we shamar guard it, So I'm going to read through a few texts, Zion, and we're going to allow the Ruach HaKodesh, the set-apart spirit, to expound upon these texts and to teach us why the Shabbat Yom is indeed so special and why it is so important to Yah. So beginning in the beginning, in Barashif, meaning in the beginning, the second chapter, verse 1 through 3, this is the first place that we find the Shabbat mentioned. This is the first place in which we find the Shabbat mentioned. And it reads, beginning at verse 1, thus the Shamayim, and are what's commonly called heavens, and the Arats, what's commonly called earth, were completed, and all their array. And in the seventh day, Elohim completed his work which he had done, and he rested. And he rested. Now this word here, the English filler word here is rested, but the abrit here is Shabbat. Shabbat. Indeed, Shabbat means to cease, desist, and rest from work. And so here is the first place that Shabbat is mentioned, and it's mentioned in context with the seventh day. Not the first day, but the seventh day. And this has not changed, as Yah is eternal, and he rested on a specific day, a fixed, eternal, specific day. Thus, his Shabbat day is fixed and eternal, and it does not change. Similarly, 1 through 7 has not changed. 1 through 7 has not changed. The sequential order, in other words, of creation has not changed since creation. Has not changed since creation. Now, I'm not going to get into lunar Shabbats, lunar solar Shabbats. I'm not going to get into that because as far as I'm concerned, it's not up for debate. 1 through 7 has not changed. It is fixed and eternal. The seventh day, there is a fixed, specific, eternal day that Yahuwah rested upon, and this day does not change. It does not change. It's not predicated on a moon cycle or on the first sliver of the moon. It's not predicated on any of that. It's predicated on a sequential order that was established in the very beginning, 1 through 7, and that order has not changed. So, indeed, this video is not about that, but Yah needs you to understand that he rested on a specific, fixed, eternal day that does not change, that points towards something that too is fixed and eternal. That too is fixed and eternal. It points towards his fixed time of return, his appointed time of return, and that specific day is fixed and eternal. We're going to talk more about that later. Nevertheless, this is the first place that Shabbat is mentioned. Shabbat is mentioned, the Abrit, Shabbat is mentioned here. And he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had made. And Elohim barak the seventh day and set it apart, meaning he distinguished it from all other days. He set it apart from all other days. This is separate and distinct from every other day in the week. And Elohim barak the seventh day and set it apart because on it he rested. Here again is Shabbat, from all his work which Elohim in creating had made. In creating had made. So this is the first instance where we find Shabbat mentioned. This is the first instance where we find Shabbat mentioned. Now in Shamma'ut, or Exodus, the 20th chapter, verse 8 through 11, here now we are commanded to shamar, to guard the Shabbat, to keep it set apart. Here now we are commanded, to guard the Shabbat. And this again is an eternal commandment because Yahuwah's word is forever established in Shamayim, and it changes not. He is fixed and he does not change, and neither does his word. And so here in Shamma'ut, or Exodus, the 20th chapter, verse 8 through 11, here now we receive the command, the eternal command to guard his Shabbat and to keep it set apart. Yet he doesn't tell us why yet, other than he rested on the seventh day. Other than he rested on the seventh day. Indeed, this should be enough. This should be enough because, he commanded us to do it. He too rested on the seventh day. And we wanting to be like our Father, we being created in the image of YAHUAH'S, we too should want to imitate the behavior of our Father. So this should be enough. However, he wants us to dig deeper. He wants us to understand something. He wants us to understand why he gave the command and why it is so special to him. So nevertheless, in Shamma'ut, or Exodus, the 20th chapter, verse 8 through 11, we read here, remember the Shabbat day to set it apart. 6 days you labor, and you shall do all your work. Again, imitating the behavior of our Father. He worked 6 days in creation, and on the seventh day he rested. But the seventh day is a Shabbat of Yahuwah your Elohim. You do not do any work. You, nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your male servant, nor your female servant, nor your cattle, nor your stranger who is within your gates. For in 6 days, here we go, Yahuwah made the Shamayim and the Arats, the sea and all that is in them, and rested Shabbat, the seventh day. Therefore Yahuwah barak the Shabbat day and set it apart. So here's the command. The command is we are to rest on the Shabbat day as our Father rested on the Shabbat day. He's given us 6 days to work. As he created creation, as he worked and created creation in 6 days. And on the seventh day, he rested. And so he's given us 6 days in time, in that we are to be even as our Father is perfect, even as our Father is perfect, and we are to imitate his behavior as he rested on the seventh day. Then we too are to rest on the seventh day. But again, he wants us to dig a little deeper and understand why is the Shabbat so special. We understand the command. We understand the letter. We understand the Peshat meaning of the instruction. Again, if you've been following Yahuwah's videos through me at any length, then you understand that there are 4 levels of scriptural interpretation. There's the Peshat, which is the surface or direct meaning. There is the Remez, in other words, what is this text asking of me? There is the Darash. What is this text? What is this text pointing towards? And I don't have them in front of me. But then there is the Sud, the 4th level, which is the mystery or the hidden thing. The mystery or the hidden thing. And so we're to go through the 4 levels of scriptural interpretation when we are trying to understand and decipher scripture, when we're trying to understand and decipher scripture. So indeed, now we understand the surface meaning, which is simply to guard the Shabbat day as our Father guarded the Shabbat day, to work 6 days as our Father worked 6 days, and to rest on the seventh day. And so unraveling this onion and discovering the deeper, the Sud meaning of this, the mystery or the hidden thing that's embedded in the Shabbat day, we'll begin reading in Yahu, commonly called Jeremiah, the 17th chapter, and we're going to read verse 15 through 27. Yahu, or commonly called Jeremiah, and we're going to read verse 17 through, Yahu, Jeremiah chapter 17, and we're going to read verse 15 through 27. So beginning at 15, verse 15, we read, See, they say to me, where is the word of Yahuwah? Let it come now. And I have not run away from being a shepherd who follows you, nor have I longed for the desperately sick day. Now here, Yahu is sent to warn the house of Yehuda. Indeed, the house of Ephraim, Yasha'al, had already been dispersed among the nations since 722 BCE. But he's sent here now to warn the house of Yehuda about their impending captivity because of the sins of Manasseh. Because of the sins of Manasseh. Manasseh had committed so many abominations that Yahuwah had decided that he was going to punish Yehuda for the sins of Manasseh and that he wasn't going to relent from them. He had so infuriated Yahuwah, Manasseh, had so infuriated Yahuwah with his abominations, with practicing divination and marriage and magic and passing his own sons and daughters through the fire and setting up an asherim or an Asherah pole inside the most set apart place where Yahuwah had decided to place his name, an Asherah pole inside the Ha'iko itself. And so he was so infuriated with the sins of Manasseh that he was determined to punish Yehuda for them. And so he sends Yahu, the Nabi Yahu, to warn Yehuda to repent, so that perhaps he would change his mind, and perhaps he would not punish them as harshly. Perhaps he wouldn't punish them as harshly. And so he sends Yahu, a Nabi, to warn them about the impending danger. Reading on, you yourself have known that which came out of my lips was before you. Do not be a ruin to me. You are my shelter in the day of evil. Let these who persecute me be put to shame, but do not let them be put to shame. And this is Yahu speaking with respect to them persecuting him. Because if you're a student of Scripture, then you know they treated him very harshly. They treated this man of Yah very harshly and wouldn't listen to a word that Yah spoke through him. Nevertheless, reading on, let them be broken, but do not let me be broken. Bring on them the day of evil and destroy them with double destruction. Thus said Yahuwah to me, go and stand in the gate of the children of the people, by which the sovereigns of Yehuda come in and by which they go out, and in all the gates of Jerusalem. And you shall say to them, hear the word of Yahuwah, you sovereigns of Yehuda, and all Yehuda, and all the inhabitants of Jerusalem who enter by these gates. Thus said Yahuwah, guard yourselves. Hear me, Zion. Excuse me. Guard yourselves. Listen. And bear no burden on the Shabbat day. And bear no burden on the Shabbat day. And so here now, after Jerusalem, after Yehuda had committed all of these abominations during the time of Manasseh, and during these times of the sovereigns of the Yehuda, they're committing these very same abominations, similar or akin to when Yarab, commonly called Jeroboam, led the northern kingdom into apostasy, and even after that, they continued in that very same apostasy. Here we see in the apostasy that Manasseh started, the sovereigns of Yehuda then continued in that very same apostasy. And again, that apostasy was so vile to Yahuwah. The apostasy of Manasseh was so vile that he vowed to send Yehuda into captivity. Yet, he's saying here, despite all those vile abominations and the apostasy that Yehuda had committed through Manasseh, here he's saying now, thus said Yahuwah, guard yourself and bring no burden on the Shabbat day. And bring no burden on the Shabbat day. Now, there are other commandments that he could have mentioned, but he specifically here mentions the Shabbat day. He specifically here mentions the Shabbat day after all the abominations that Yehuda had committed. Reading on, nor bring it in by the gates of Jerusalem, nor take a burden out of your houses on the Shabbat day, nor do any work. And you shall set apart the Shabbat day as I commanded your fathers. But they did not obey or incline their ear. And they made their necks stiff, not to hear and not to receive instruction. And it shall be, listen, Zion, and it shall be, if you diligently obey me, again, this is after all the abominations that had been committed, yet he specifically mentions the Shabbat day. And it shall be, if you diligently obey me, declares Yahuwah, to bring in no burden through the gates of this city on the Shabbat day, and set apart the Shabbat day to do no work in it, then sovereigns and heads sitting on the throne of Dawood shall enter through the gates of this city, riding in chariots and on horses, just for keeping the Shabbat day. They and their heads, the men of Yehuda, and the inhabitants of Jerusalem. And this city shall be inhabited forever. Aulam, eternity, forever. And all of this is predicated on guarding the Shabbat day, which my ancestors did not guard, and which Yah's people, even to this day, are not guarding. And so we see here again now eternity. This is the first place where we see eternity mentioned in the context of guarding the Shabbat day. Eternity here is mentioned in the context of guarding the Shabbat day. And this city shall be inhabited forever. Indeed, the Shabbat day, guarding the Shabbat day, is a salvation issue. And we're going to talk about this further. But it is a salvation issue. Salvation is predicated on guarding the Shabbat day. And we're going to talk about this some more. But it is predicated on guarding the Shabbat day. And they shall come from the cities of Yehuda, and from the places all around Jerusalem, and from the land of Benjamin, commonly called Benjamin, and from the low country, from the mountains, and from the south, bringing ascending offerings and slaughterings, grain offerings and incense, bringing offerings of praise to the house of Yahuwah. Hear me, but if you do not obey me to set apart the Shabbat day, and not to bring a burden when entering the gates of Jerusalem on the Shabbat day, then I shall kindle a fire in its gates, and it shall consume the palaces of Jerusalem, and not be quenched. And not be quenched. Still, we're discovering, allowing Yah to reveal to us again, why is it so special? Why, after Yehuda committed all of those abominations, I mean unspeakable abominations, passing the children through the fire, passing divination and magic, and setting up an Asherah inside the set-apart place, the place where he had placed his name. After all this had been done, Yahuwah issuing the declaration through Yahu, Jeremiah, that if you guard my Shabbat day, then I'm going to establish this city forever. Aulam, forever. So here is the first place that we get an understanding that eternity and the Shabbat day are mentioned in the same context, in the same voice. Indeed, here is where we learn that guarding the Shabbat day is a salvation issue. So reading on and discovering why the Shabbat day is so important, we turn now to Yashayahu, the 56th chapter, and we're going to read verse 1 through 7. Yashayahu, commonly called Isaiah, the 56th chapter, verse 1 through 7. Beginning at verse 1 now, we read, Thus said Yahuwah, guard right ruling, and do righteousness, for near is my deliverance to come. For near is my deliverance to come. For near is my Yeshua. For near is my salvation to come. Again, the Shabbat day is a salvation issue. For near is my Yeshua, deliverance, salvation to come, and my righteousness to be revealed. Baruch is the man who does this, and the Son of Man who becomes strong in it, guarding the Shabbat, lest he profane it. So here once again, we see the Shabbat mentioned in the same context of Yeshua, of deliverance, of salvation. Again, we see here established once again a second witness that guarding the Shabbat day is a salvation issue. But why, Zion? Why is it a salvation issue. We're going to continue to peel back this onion. And guarding his hand from doing any evil. And let not the son of the foreigner, here he mentions even the foreigner. Even a foreigner who decides to guard his Shabbat day can also receive Yeshua, who guards the seventh day Shabbat. Again, 1 through 7 have not changed. It is not the first day, and it's not predicated on some lunar Sabbath, predicated on some first sliver of the moon, which is not scriptural. Nevertheless, here we see that the son of the foreigner, the stranger, is invited to keep the Shabbat of YAHUAH'S. And let not the son of the foreigner who has joined himself to Yahuwah speak, saying, Yahuwah has certainly separated me from his people. Nor let the eunuch say, and to gain context about the eunuch, go back and read Dabarim, the 23rd chapter. Nor let the eunuch say, look, I am a dry tree, for thus said Yahuwah. To the eunuchs who guard my Shabbat, and have chosen what pleases me, who guard my Shabbat, shamar, who guard, who take hold of, who stand watch over, who guard my Shabbats, and have chosen what pleases me, and are holding on to my covenant. To them I shall give in my house, and within my walls, a place and a name better than sons and daughters. Better than sons and daughters, simply for shamar, for guarding his Shabbat day. I give them an everlasting name that is not cut off. Also the sons of the foreigner who join themselves to Yahuwah to serve him and to love the name of Yahuwah, to be his servants, all who shamar, who guard the Shabbat, who guard the Shabbat. Again, we see Yeshua, salvation, again, predicated on guarding the Shabbat. All who guard the Shabbat and not profane it, and are holding onto my covenant, them I shall bring to my set-apart mountain, and let them rejoice in my house of prayer. Their ascending offerings and their slaughterings are accepted on my slaughter place, for my house is called a house of prayer for all the peoples, for all the people. One more witness in Yashayahu, or Isaiah, reading now from the 58th chapter, the 12th through the 14th verse. Beginning at verse 12, we read here, and those from among you shall build the old waste places. Now here we're talking about the time of gathering. We're talking about the first resurrection, when Yahusha comes back to split the sky, and the son of Adam is shown in the sky, and he sends his messengers to the four winds of the earth with the great sound of a shofar, to the four winds of the earth, and the dead, to gather his scattered people, to gather. Here is where two sticks become one, Yehuda and Ephraim, and the stranger joined to us, and to gather his people from the four corners of the earth with the great sound of the shofar, and where the dead now in Mashiach shall rise, and those of us who are alive and remain will be changed in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, and will be caught up with them, and there in our land will we be with our Yahuwah, with Yahuwah al-Yun always, with Yahuwah al-Yun always. And so here we're talking about the gathering. When he's talking about building the old waste places, we're talking about the first resurrection. We're talking about the 1,000-year reign. We're talking about the millennial reign, just to give you some context. And those from among you shall build the old waste places. You shall raise up the foundations of many generations, and you would be called the repairer of the breach, the restorer of streets to dwell in. If you, listen, if you do turn back your foot from the Shabbat. Here again, we see the Shabbat is a salvation issue. Once again, the Shabbat is mentioned in the context of salvation. if you do turn back your foot from the Shabbat, from doing your pleasure on my set apart day, and shall call the Shabbat a delight, the set apart day of Yahuwah esteemed, and shall esteem it, not doing your own ways, nor finding your own pleasure, nor speaking your own words, then you shall delight yourself in Yahuwah, and I shall cause you to ride on the heights of the earth, and feed you with the inheritance of Yaqub, your father, for the mouth of Yahuwah has spoken. For the mouth of Yahuwah has spoken. So once again, it's the third time that we see the Shabbat mentioned in the context of Yeshua and our salvation. Mentioned in the context of Yeshua or salvation. Switching over now to the Brit Kadashah, or commonly called the New Testament, but more accurately translated into the renewed covenant, because it's not new, it's renewed. It's a renewed covenant, a renewed everlasting covenant. There is only one everlasting covenant that has now been renewed by the shed blood of Yahushua HaMashiach. And so now, reading here in the Brit Kadashah, or the renewed covenant, from the book of Abrim, commonly called Hebrews, the 3rd chapter, verse 7 through 19, we read here, therefore, as the set-apart Spirit says, today if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts as in the rebellion, in the day of trial in the wilderness, where your fathers tried me, proved me, and saw my works 50 years. Therefore I was grieved with that generation, and said, they always go astray in their heart, and they have not known my ways. As I swore in my wrath, if they should enter my rest. As I swore in my wrath, if they should enter my rest. And we understand that this is what Shabbat means. Shabbat means to cease, desist, to rest from work. So here he's saying, as I swore in my wrath, if they shall enter into my Shabbat. Look out, brothers, lest there be any of you of a wicked heart of unbelief and falling away from the living Elohim. But encourage one another daily while it is called today, lest one of you be hardened by the deceitfulness of sin. For we have become partakers of Messiah, if we hold fast the beginning of our trust firm to the end, while it is said, today, if you hear my voice, do not harden your hearts, as in the rebellion, for having heard, rebelled. Was it not all who came out of Mitzrayim led by Masha? And with whom was he grieved 40 years? Was it not with those who sinned, whose corpses fell in the wilderness? And to whom did he swear that they would not enter his rest, enter his Shabbat? But to those who did not obey, So we see that they were unable to enter in because of unbelief. Because of unbelief. Reading again, staying in the book of Abrim, commonly called Hebrews, we're going to read now the 4th chapter, verse 1 through 11. Beginning at verse 1, we read, Therefore, since a promise remains of entering into his rest, of entering into his Shabbat, let us fear lest any of you seem to have come short of it. Indeed, it is a salvation issue. For indeed the good news was brought to us as well as to them. But the word which they heard did not profit them, not having been mixed with belief in those who heard it. For we who have believed do enter that rest, as he has said, as I swore in my wrath, if they shall enter my rest. And yet his works have come into being from the foundation of the world. For somewhere he has said, thus about the 7th day. Hear me. For somewhere he has said thus about the seventh day. And Elohim rested, Shabbat. Now the word here is Sabbatos. It is the Greek Sabbatos, which means Shabbat, which means Shabbat. And Elohim rested on the seventh day from all his works. And in this age, if they shall enter into my rest. Since then, it remains for some to enter into it, and those who formerly received the good news did not enter in because of disobedience. He again defines a certain day. Today, saying through Daud, as much later as it has been said, today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts. For if Yahusha, commonly called Joshua, for if Yahusha had given them rest, he would not have spoken of another day after that. So there remains a Shabbat keeping. Now, I know in the KJV, this reads, so there remains a rest. But if you read the Greek, if you look at the Greek, and I know I despise the Greek tongue. It is wicked. It is abominable. It is a filthy pagan tongue that is full of abominable words and the worship of mighty ones. Nevertheless, for the sake of teaching, if you look at the Greek here for rest, what you will find is the Greek word Sabbatos. Sabbatos. And it means seventh day rest. And it also means a Shabbat keeping. A Shabbat keeping, a Shabbat keeping. So there remains a Shabbat keeping for the people of Elohim. For the one having entered into his rest has himself also rested from his works, as Elohim rested from his own. Let us therefore do our utmost to enter into that rest, lest anyone fall after the same example of disobedience. So once again, even in the Brit Kadashah, we understand that the Shabbat is a salvation issue. It is a salvation issue. Entering into that rest, Yah's rest, is predicated upon resting on the Shabbat day. It is predicated upon guarding the Shabbat. Again, but why is it a salvation issue? We've understood the Pashat meaning of it and why we do it, and we've understood by the precept of Scripture that it is in fact a salvation issue and that it is special. But why is it so special, and why is it a salvation issue? Why is it a salvation issue? To further peel back this onion and to arrive at this answer, we need to look at the word Shabbat itself. We need to look at the word Shabbat itself. Now, it is Strong's Abrit, or Hebrew, 7676. And it is comprised of the Abrit letters Shin, Bayif, and Tau. Shin, Bayif, and Tau. These three Abrit letters make up the word, the transliterated word Shabbat. These three Abrit letters make up the transliterated word Shabbat. Shabbat being a transliteration which carries the same phonetic sound as the original Abrit word, carrying the same phonetic sound and carrying the same meaning as the original Abrit word. This is what a transliteration is. Nevertheless, looking at the Abrit letters and understanding the Abrit, we understand that Abrit letters are represented by symbols and words, and by putting together the different symbols that represent the letters, we're able to put words and phrases together and get a better understanding or context of what it is the Abrit word is trying to relay. For instance, Again, in the transliterated word Shabbat, we find the Abrit letters Shin, Bayit, and Tau. Shin being representative of S, H, and A, and Bayit being representative of the letter B, and Tau of the letter T. But in looking deeper, we understand that Shin represents two front teeth, sharp, press, and consume. This is what Shin represents. The Abrit letter Shin, it represents two front teeth, sharp, press, and consume. Bayit, the Hebrew, the Abrit letter Bayit, represents tent, family, house, inside, and the body. Finally, the Abrit letter Tau represents X, mark, seal, sign, and ownership. X, mark, seal, sign, and ownership. And so when placing these meanings together behind these Abrit letters, we understand now that we are to take hold of the Shabbat day with a firm grip as with two front teeth. Through it, we enter into, listen, the tent, the family, the house of Yahuwah, Bayit. Those who keep the Shabbat are the body of Mashiach, as represented by Bayit. Those who keep or guard the Shabbat are the body of Yahuwah, or the body of the Mashiach, or the body of the Mashiach. Again, this is what the Abrit letter Bayit means. It is indeed the mark, the sign, the seal of the everlasting covenant. Hear me. It is indeed the Tau. It is indeed the Tau. It is the mark, the sign, the seal of the everlasting covenant. Because we understand that Yahuwah is the Aleph and the Tau. He's not the Alpha and Omega as some of the corrupt Greek translation of the New Testament would have us to believe. There is no ending to him, Zion. There is no ending to him. He is everlasting, and thus he is the Aleph and the Tau. In other words, he is the beginning and the everlasting covenant. Tau being representative of covenant. Tau being representative of covenant. And thus, it being the Shabbat day, is the mark, the sign, and the seal of the everlasting covenant. The Shabbat day is the sign, the seal, and the mark of the everlasting covenant. Through it, we are identified as Yahuwah's people. It shows who owns us, as in the letter Tau. It represents ownership. It represents ownership. Through it, we are identified as Yahuwah's people. It shows who owns us. In other words, it shows whose we are. Through the Shabbat day, hear me, we enter into our rest. Rest is the covenant of promise. Rest is the covenant of promise. Shabbat, rest, is the covenant of promise. It is the everlasting promise. It is the everlasting covenant that he would give us rest, that we would enter into rest, that we would enter into Shabbat. And thus, Shabbat represented by the Abrit letters, Shin, Bayit, and Tau. The Tau being representative of the everlasting covenant, and the Shabbat day being representative of the seal and the sign and the mark of the everlasting covenant. We read in Dabarim, and we're going to shut this down, the 12th chapter, verse 1 through 10, beginning at verse 1, and we're talking about the Shabbat day is the sign, the seal, the symbol, the mark of the everlasting covenant, and it is synonymous with the promise. The promise is rest. It is synonymous with the covenant of rest. It is synonymous with the everlasting covenant. Reading beginning at verse 1, we read, "These are the laws and right rulings which you guard to do in the land which Yahuwah Elohim of your fathers is giving you to possess. All the days that you live on the soil, completely destroy all the places where the nations which are dispossessing serve their mighty, which you are dispossessing, serve their mighty ones. On the high mountains and on the hills and under every green tree. And you shall break down their slaughter places and smash their pillars and burn their asherim with fire. And you shall cut down the carved images of their mighty ones and shall destroy their names out of that place. Do not do so to Yahuwah your Elohim, but seek the place which Yahuwah your Elohim chooses out of all your tribes to put his name there for his dwelling place, and there you shall enter. And there you shall take your ascending offerings and your slaughters and your tithes and the contributions of your hand, and your vowed offerings and your voluntary offerings and the firstlings of your herd and of your flock, and there you shall eat before Yahuwah your Elohim, and shall rejoice in all that you put your hand to, you and your households, in which Yahuwah your Elohim has baruch you. Do not do as we are doing here today, each one doing whatever is right in his own eyes, because you have not yet entered the rest, hear me, because you have not yet entered the rest, the Shabbat, and the inheritance which Yahuwah your Elohim is giving you. Because you have not yet entered the rest and the inheritance which Yahuwah your Elohim is giving you. But you shall pass over the Yarden and shall dwell in the land which Yahuwah your Elohim is giving you to inherit. And he shall give you rest from your enemies round and about, and you shall dwell in safety. And you shall dwell in safety. Now here we see rest used in the same breath as the land. We see rest used in the same breath as the inheritance. We see that rest and the land and inheritance here are synonymous. Because you have not yet entered the rest and the inheritance which Yahuwah your Elohim has given you. So again, now here we see that rest and inheritance and the land are used synonymously. Why is this so? Why is rest and the land and the inheritance here used synonymously? Peeling back this onion even further, we look to the book of Tehillim, or Psalms, verse 16, verse 5 through 6. It reads here, Yahuwah is the portion of my inheritance and my cup. You uphold my lot. Boundary lines have fallen to me in pleasant places. Indeed, a good inheritance is mine. So now here, we see that Yahuwah is our inheritance. And above, we read that the land is our inheritance. And the land is also used in the same breath as rest. It is used in the same breath as rest and inheritance. But here we understand that Yahuwah is the portion of my inheritance. That Yahuwah is the portion of our inheritance. What is he trying to tell us, Zion? What is he trying to tell us? Peeling back this onion even further, we understand in Matif Yahu, the 11th chapter, or Matthew, the 11th chapter, verse 29 and 30, beginning at verse 29, we read, Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am meek and humble in heart, and you shall find rest for your beings. For my yoke is gentle and my burden is light. My burden is light. What Yahuwah wants us to understand, family, is that the land and Yahuwah is synonymous. Hear me. The land and Yahuwah is synonymous. This is why it's spoken of in the context of inheritance and rest. Inheritance and rest. And we read before that Yahuwah is our inheritance, and that now we've just read that Yahuwah is our rest. He is our rest. And so we understand now that the land and Yahuwah is synonymous. He is the land. Yahusha shed blood renewed the everlasting covenant that our ancestors broke. They would not guard the Shabbat. And so through his blood, which renews the everlasting covenant, we can now enter into our rest through Yahusha HaMashiach. We can now enter into our Shabbat through Yahusha HaMashiach. Reading in Yashayahu, Isaiah, the 62nd chapter, verse 1 through 5, we're going to see here again where Yahuwah is the land. The land and Yahuwah is synonymous. Yahuwah is synonymous with rest. Yahuwah is synonymous with Shabbat. Yahuwah is synonymous with the land. He is the Aleph and the Tau. He is the beginning and the everlasting covenant. He is the everlasting covenant. He is rest. He is the promised rest. He is the promised rest. Thus, reading in Isaiah, the 62nd chapter, verse 1 through 5, we read, "For Zion's sake I am not silent, and for Jerusalem's sake I do not rest, until her righteousness goes forth as brightness, and her deliverance as a lamp that burns. And the nations shall see your righteousness, and all the sovereigns your esteem. And you shall be called by a new name, which the mouth of Yahuwah designates. And you shall be a crown of comeliness and our beauty, and the hand of Yahuwah, and a royal headdress in the hand of your Elohim. No longer are you called forsaken, and no longer is your land called deserted, but you shall be called Haf-Zibah, and your land married, and your land married." Hold up. I thought that the bride of Yahuwah, which is Yashar'al, was going to marry him. Was going to marry him, or is going to marry him. We are going to marry him. But what he wants you to understand is that he is the land. Everything that contains life is Yahuwah. Everything that contains life is Yahuwah, inclusive of the land. And thus, we are going to marry the land as we are going to marry Yahuwah. As Yahuwah is our portion, as Yahuwah is our inheritance, we're going to marry the land, and the land is our portion, and the land is our inheritance, and the land is our rest, as Yahuwah is our rest. He is our Shabbat. He is the covenant of promise. He is the covenant of rest. For Yahuwah shall delight in you, and your land be married. For as a young man marries a woman, marries a maiden, so shall your sons marry you. And as the bridegroom rejoices over the bride, so shall your Elohim rejoice over you. Again, family, he is the Aleph and the Tau. He is the beginning and the everlasting covenant. Tau being representative of covenant. This is the last letter in the Abrit transliterated word Shabbat. Shin Bayi Tau. He is the beginning and the everlasting covenant. The promise that he has given to us is everlasting life, is everlasting rest. The promise is rest. The promise is rest from our labors. The promise is rest from our works. The promise is rest from the trials and the struggles of life. The promise is rest. The promise is entering into our Shabbat, of entering into our everlasting rest. He is rest, as spoken in Matif Yahu. He is rest. He is the everlasting covenant. He is Shabbat. He is Shabbat. He is the beginning and the everlasting covenant. Thus, 6,000 years mankind has been given to work. And on the 7,000th year, the Shabbat year, we're going to enter into a rest. We're going to enter into Shabbat. We're going to enter into Shabbat. As the Messiah was resurrected on the Shabbat, his first fruit, his firstborn son, his bride is going to follow in like manner and also be resurrected on the Shabbat day. On the Shabbat day. On the 8,000th year, on the last great day, the booth of Yah is going to descend from Shamayim, and it's going to make its abode amongst men. Most of you who are students of Scripture, you understand that the last great day is also a Shabbat day. It is also a day of rest. So indeed, even in the second resurrection, when the rest of mankind is resurrected, they too are going to be resurrected on the Shabbat. Everything is predicated on the Shabbat. Everything is predicated on rest. This is the promise. The promise is rest. The covenant is predicated on rest. The covenant is predicated on the Shabbat. The everlasting covenant is predicated on the Shabbat. The Shabbat day indeed is the sign, the seal, and the mark of the everlasting covenant. It is what identifies his people. It is what marks us. It is what marks his covenant people. It is what marks the bride, the body of HaMashiach. It is what marks us. It is the sign that identifies us and separates us from the rest of the nations. Indeed, it is the sign, the mark, and the seal of the everlasting covenant. Of the everlasting covenant. He is the alive. He is the beginning. He is the Tau and our everlasting covenant. He is the completion of restoration. He is the completion of restoration. The revelation of Yahusha. The revelation of Yahusha. Indeed, he identifies himself as the Aleph and the Tau there. The beginning and the everlasting covenant. The beginning and the everlasting covenant. The revelation of the covenant. The revelation of the covenant of promise. The revelation of Yahushua HaMashiach. The revelation of the everlasting covenant. Lastly, reading in Shema'ut, or Exodus, the 31st chapter, verse 13 through 18. We read here, and you speak to the children of Yasha'al, saying, my Shabbats you are to guard, by all means, for it is a sign. And the word, the abrit here is Ahuf. Ahuf. And we'll talk about this a little bit more further down. For this is a sign, Ahuf, between me and you throughout your generations, to know that I, Yahuwah, am setting you apart. And you shall guard the Shabbat, for it is set apart to you. Everyone who profanes it shall certainly be put to death. Everyone who profanes it shall certainly be put to death. Because if you don't guard it, you're not his covenant people. And if you're not his covenant people, you're not going to enter into your rest, into the rest that has been designated for his Shabbat keeping people, for his covenant people who keep his Shabbat, which is the sign of the everlasting covenant, which is the sign of the everlasting covenant of Shalom, the everlasting covenant of rest. Everyone who profanes it shall certainly be put to death. For anyone who does work on it, that being shall be cut off from among his people. 6 days work is done, and on the seventh is a Shabbat rest, set apart to Yahuwah. Everyone doing work on the Shabbat day, here we go again, here we hear it again, shall certainly be put to death. He is laying before you a choice, life and death. Obey his commands, that is life. Obey his Torah, there is life in his Torah. There is death in disobedience of his Torah, because disobedience of his Torah is what we call sin, what we call transgression of Torah, and the wages of sin is death. The wages of sin is death. If you don't guard the everlasting covenant, if you don't guard the everlasting covenant of rest, if you are not marked and sealed with the sign of the everlasting covenant, which is the Shabbat day, which is the Shabbat of rest, then how can you expect to enter into your rest? And the children of Yasha'al shall guard the Shabbat to perform the Shabbat throughout their generations as an everlasting covenant. As an everlasting covenant. Do you hear? And the children of Yasha'al shall guard the Shabbat, and the children of Yasha'al shall guard the Shabbat to perform the Shabbat throughout their generations as an everlasting covenant. This is the sign, the seal, and the mark of the everlasting covenant. Of the everlasting covenant. This is why it's so special for us who long to enter into our rest. And this is why it is so special to Yahuwah, because it is the sign, the seal, and the mark of the everlasting covenant. hidden within it is the promise of rest. And hidden within it is embedded when he's going to gather his people at the appointed time on the 7,000th year on the Shabbat day. Between me and the children of Yasha'al, it is a sign forever. Ahuf, forever. For in 6 days Yahuwah made the Shamayim and the earth, and on the 7th day he rested and was refreshed. And when he had ended speaking with him on Mount Sinai, he gave Moshe 2 tablets of the witness, tablets of stone, written with the finger of Elohim. And so now let's take a look, and we're going to shut this down. Let's take a quick look at Ahuf, the word for sign, the Abrif word for sign. And it is comprised of the word, of the Abrif letters rather, Alaf, Ua, and let's see here. Alaf, Ua, and Tau. Alaf, Tua, Ua rather. Alaf, Ua, and Tau. Alaf, Ua, and Tau. Now we understand that Alaf is represented by an ox, head, strong, power, and leader. And so we understand that the Alaf is representative of Yahuwah himself. The letter Alaf is representative of Yahuwah himself because he is the Alaf and the Tau. He is the Alaf and the Tau. The next letter we see here is Ua. It's Ua, and it is representative of a peg, a nail, a hook, a bond, and it means to secure. And the last letter is Tau. The last letter is Tau. And again, it is representative of an X, a mark, a sign, a seal, and ownership. And so putting these together now, putting these letters together that make up the transliterated word Ahuf, which is transliterated into sign, we cement here why the Shabbat day is special. Why the Shabbat day is special. It is the peg, Zion, which the Abrif letter Ua represents. It is the peg, the nail, the hook, and bond that joins us to Yahuwah, the Alaf and the Tau, the beginning and the everlasting covenant. And the everlasting covenant. It is the peg, the bond, and the hook that joins us to the Alaf and the Tau. Again, the Abrif word for sign here is Ahuf, and it is comprised of the Abrif letters Alaf, Ua, and Tau. And so we understand that Ua represents a nail or tent peg or hook, and the Alaf represents an ox. It is representative of Yahuwah, and the Tau is representative of a mark, a sign, a seal, and ownership. And we understand that Yahuwah is the Alaf, the beginning, and the Tau, the everlasting covenant. And so in the word Ahuf, we see now with Ua, that which is representative of a hook or a nail or a peg. We see how the Shabbat is the sign. This is what joins us in an everlasting covenant with the Alaf and the Tau. This is what joins us into covenant with him, the Shabbat day. The Shabbat day is what joins us with Yahuwah, the Alaf and the Tau, the beginning and the everlasting covenant. He is the Shabbat. He is rest. Thus, he is the master of the Shabbat. Everything surrounds the Shabbat day. Yahuwah himself is the Shabbat. He is rest, and he has given us the Shabbat day to rest in him, as those who love him and those who rest in him now will do so throughout eternity. In the Shabbat, he has given us himself. Indeed, he is the master of the Shabbat. Yahuwah, Yehuda, as we read above, Yehuda had committed many abominations. Many abominations because of the sins of Manasseh. Yet it was the Shabbat that Yahuwah addressed as a precursor for their restoration, for their everlasting restoration. Yahusha, again, rose on the Shabbat. The first resurrection will take place on the Shabbat day. The second resurrection will take place on a Shabbat, on the last great day, which is a Shabbat indeed. Indeed, if we are not guarding the Shabbat, as mentioned in the book of Abrim, we will not enter into our rest. We will not enter into our Shabbat. We will not enter. It is the sign, the seal, the mark, the ownership of the everlasting covenant. It is the sign of the everlasting covenant. If you're not guarding the Shabbat, you're not in covenant with him. You're not in covenant with him. It's special. It's special. And so this message is for both those who guard the Shabbat, so that you have a renewed understanding of it and understand why it is so very special to Yah, because again, it is the sign of the everlasting covenant. And for those who do not guard the Shabbat, so that you understand that if you are not guarding the 7th-day Shabbat as prescribed in Torah, as prescribed in the instructions of YAHUAH'S, then you are not in covenant with him, and you will not enter your rest. You will not enter your rest. And so now Zion, in accordance with Bamidbar, Numbers, the 10th chapter, the 10th verse, and it reads, in the day of your gladness, and in your appointed times, and at the beginning of your new months, you shall blow the trumpets over your ascending offerings and over your slaughterings of shalom offerings. And they shall be a remembrance for you before Elohim. I am Yahuwah, your Elohim. As we read finally in Tahalim of Psalms, the 81st verse, the 81st chapter, verse 1 through 4, shout for gladness to Elohim, our strength. Raise a shout to the Elohim of Yaqub. Lift up a song and beat the tambourines, the pleasant lyre, and with the harp. Blow a shofar in the new month, and the covering for the day of our festivals. For this is a law for Yasha'al, and a right ruling of the Elohim of Yaqub. And so we enter into the Shabbat with gladness, blowing the shofar, understanding that you are in covenant with YAHUAH'S, understanding that you have been sealed with the sign, the mark of the everlasting covenant, which is the Shabbat day, which is predicated upon entering into our rest, which is predicated upon the covenant of promise, which is rest, which is predicated upon the covenant of promise, which is eternal, everlasting rest. I pray that this has been a barakah. I pray that this has been edifying. I pray that you have been encouraged, both of the house of Yaqub and both of those who are outside of the house of Yaqub. I pray that your eyes have been opened. Yahuwah barak you and guard you. Yahuwah make his face shine upon you and show favor to you. Yahuwah lift up his face upon you and give you shalom. Thus you shall put my name upon the children of Yasha'al, and I myself shall barak them. So be it, so be it, so be it. Shalom.